I stood there, gawking at my 4 suitcases, all lined up tidy as soldiers on the sidewalk, my brain struggling to catch up with my eyes. I just spent a week with my sister in Colorado, dreaming of collapsing into my cozy armchair back home with a steaming mug of tea. But there I was, locked out of the house I'd called mine for decades. Dark rainclouds were piling up in the sky as I spotted a note wedged under the handle of my biggest suitcase. The handwriting hit me like a punch. It was those sharp, slanted letters that always looked like they were rushing somewhere. If you want to stay, the garage is yours. Love, your daughter-in-law. My hands shook as I reread the words, each one sinking in deeper. For 30 years, this house had been my life. Thomas and I had poured our hearts into building it when Michael was still in diapers. Every tree in the yard, we'd planted together, every light fixture, we'd picked out, every wall, we'd painted with care. When Thomas passed 18 months ago, I'd signed the house over to Michael and Claire on paper, but I was still the one quietly footing the mortgage bill. Before the taxi even turned the corner, I was on my phone, calling the bank to confirm what my gut already knew. Mrs. Harper, your automatic payment of $2,150 cleared last Thursday, right on schedule, the bank rep told me cheerfully. Thanks, I mumbled, hanging up, my voice barely a whisper. A fat raindrop plopped onto my forehead as I stood there, 65 years old, staring at my life packed up on the curb. Then the sky let loose, like it was telling me it was okay to fall apart too. I should have seen the signs. Those sneaky looks Michael and Claire swapped whenever I talked about sprucing up my kitchen. They're not so subtle hints about senior homes where I wouldn't have to mow the lawn. How they'd shuffled my favorite reading chair to the basement last Easter while I was at my sister's, rearranging the living room like I didn't belong. Little moments that added up to something big. The garage door wasn't locked, and inside, I found a twin mattress propped against a wall, a rickety nightstand with a lamp next to it. My clothes hung on a flimsy portable rack, and my books, photos, and mementos were crammed into cardboard boxes, labeled Mom's stuff in Claire's neat script. I sank onto the mattress, the cold concrete floor chilling my feet. Through the tiny window, I could see the house where I'd raised my boy, mourned my husband, and somehow lost my place. My phone buzzed, Michael's text, Mom, we need room. Claire's been wanting a home office forever. The garage setup has all you need. Don't make a fuss. Don't make a fuss. Like I was the one causing trouble. I'm not one to cry much, but right then, hot, quiet tears rolled down my cheeks. I thought of all those nights I sat up with Michael, soothing him through asthma attacks when he was little. The second job I took to cover his college tuition when Thomas's business tanked. The weekends I babysat the grandkids so Michael and Claire could have date nights. And now, I was just a nuisance, shoved into the garage like an old piece of furniture. I didn't text Michael back. Instead, I dialed Linda, my ride-or-die friend, for years. Evelyn, what's going on? She asked, picking up on the crack in my voice right away. I need somewhere to crash, I choked out, the words sharp and jagged in my throat. They've stuck me in the garage. Linda didn't waste time with questions. I'm there in 15, she said, and I could hear her grabbing her keys. As I sat on that thin mattress, surrounded by boxes holding my life, I made up my mind. This house had been my everything for 30 years, my love, my savings, my dreams, and they thought they could just push me out like I didn't matter. The rain pounded harder, rattling the garage door. I looked at my shaking hands and slowly clenched them into fists. They didn't know who I was. I wasn't just Michael's mom or Thomas's widow. I was Evelyn Harper, and I was done fading into the background. Linda's guest room wasn't fancy, but it had a real door I could lock and windows that let in honest-to-goodness sunlight. After 2 nights at the Sunset Motel, a name that hit too close to home for this mess I was in, I was thankful for a place that didn't charge by the night. Stay as long as you need, Evelyn, Linda said, sliding a mug of coffee my way. Robert and I are just rattling around this big house since the kids flew the nest. I curled my hands around the warm mug, letting it ground me. I'm grateful, but I can't stay forever. I've got to sort out what to do about the house. Your house, you mean? Linda said, her eyes narrowing like she was ready to fight for me. The one you're still paying the mortgage on? Linda's been my friend for over 25 years. She knew Thomas, watched Michael grow up, stood by me through thick and thin. Unlike my own son, she remembered who I was before I started disappearing. I keep circling back to when things shifted, I said, staring into my coffee like it might have answers. After Thomas died, I thought signing the house over to Michael and Claire would help them out. They just had Sophie, and money was tight. And they took it and ran, Linda said, not sugarcoating it. The memory stung like old wounds I'd tried to ignore. 3 months after Thomas's funeral, Claire started rearranging the house, saying it needed a modern touch. My ideas got brushed off. My things got shuffled to closets, then the basement, then plastic bins. You know what Claire said when I got upset about her tossing Thomas's fishing rods? We've got to move on, Evelyn, not turn the house into a shrine. Like my husband's memory was just junk taking up space. Linda reached over and squeezed my hand, her grip steady. What about Michael? Didn't he stick up for you? A bitter laugh slipped out of me, catching me off guard with its hollow ring. Michael told me I was making things hard, that I had to get used to their new way of doing things. His idea of normal seems to mean erasing his dad's memory and shoving his mom to the sidelines. It crept up so slowly, I hardly noticed them taking over. At first, they started running the kitchen, poking at my recipes like they were doing me a favor. Then they grumbled about my TV shows being too loud, my friends dropping by too much, my flower beds hogging their yard space. Every time I gave in, it just made them bolder, like I was handing them pieces of my life. The hardest part to swallow is I let it happen, I confessed to Linda, my voice heavy. I kept covering the mortgage because I was scared they'd hit hard times. I thought it'd keep me close, make them need me, maybe even love me. You were trying to hold on to your place in their world, Linda said, her voice soft but piercing. Her words cut deep, laying bare the truth. I'd been buying my spot in my son's life, one mortgage payment at a time, like some desperate tenant. My phone pinged with a text from Michael. Mom, when are you picking up the rest of your stuff? We're turning the garage into Sophie's playroom. I held the screen out to Linda, my hand shaking just a bit. That ungrateful, Linda stopped herself, biting back the word. Evelyn, there's something you need to hear. I didn't want to say it because it'll sting, but you deserve to know what's going on. My stomach knotted up tight. What's that? Last month at book club, Claire was there, a little loose after a few glasses of wine, Linda said. She started blabbing about their big plans. They're putting your house up for sale, Evelyn. They've got their eyes on a shiny new place in Oakwood Hills. The room seemed to wobble, like the floor was giving way. They're selling my home. They act like it's their home, Linda said gently, her eyes full of sympathy. And on paper, it is. But anyone with a heart knows it's yours. My mind flooded with 30 years of moments woven into that house. Thomas and I carrying newborn Michael through the front door. Birthday cakes and Christmas lights, the garden Thomas surprised me with for our 15th anniversary. His final breaths in our bedroom, wrapped in the life we'd built. And now they were ready to hand it all to strangers without a backward glance. What am I supposed to do? I whispered, my voice barely holding together. Linda's face turned fierce, like she was ready to storm a castle. First off, you stop paying their mortgage. Let's see how fast their plans crumble when the bank comes knocking. But what about my credit score? I asked, worry creeping in. Next, she pushed on, undeterred, you're talking to my nephew, Stephen. He's a lawyer who knows elder rights inside out. There's got to be some way to fight this. I'm not that old, I said, half-hearted, trying to dodge the label. Linda raised an eyebrow, not letting me off the hook. You're old enough to deserve respect, and they're treating you like you don't matter. She was right, 18 months of shrinking myself, biting my tongue, trying not to be a burden, and what did it get me? Kicked out of my own home, my life stuffed into boxes, reduced to a problem they wanted to hide. As the truth sank in, something new stirred under the pain and betrayal, a slow, simmering anger I barely recognized after years of playing nice. "All right," I said, pulling my shoulders back. "Let's call Steven." Linda gave my hand a quick squeeze, her smile proud. "There's the Evelyn I know. You're not just Michael's mom or Thomas's widow, you're Evelyn Harper," and it's time they all remembered that. For the first time since I saw my suitcases on the sidewalk, a spark flared inside me, maybe hope, maybe resolve, but definitely something alive. I wasn't about to roll over and let this be the end. Steven, Linda's nephew, wasn't what I pictured for a lawyer. In his jeans and Henley, he looked more like he'd be grading papers than fighting court battles, but his sharp eyes told a different story as he scanned my mortgage statements. "So, you've been footing the bill for a house that's not even in your name anymore," he said, his brow creasing. "And your son and his wife have been living there for free while planning to cash out?" Hearing it laid out like that made it sound ridiculous, even to me. "That's right," I admitted. "And they kicked you out to the garage?" he pressed, his tone steady but incredulous. I nodded, my cheeks burning with shame. How had I let things slide this far? "You've got some paths forward," Steven said, leaning back. "The money you've been paying could be seen as part of an unspoken agreement. At the very least, you might be able to go after them for the mortgage payments you've made since you signed over the deed." Linda, who'd been quiet as a mouse, piped up. "She needs to face them first, let them know what they've done to her." Steven looked doubtful, his lips pressing into a thin line, but I knew Linda had a point. Before I dragged my own son into a courtroom, I owed him one last chance to do the right thing. The next day, I stood on my own front porch, my heart racing as I pressed the doorbell. This was the house I'd called home since before Michael came into the world, but now I felt like a stranger, waiting for someone to let me in. When Claire opened the door, her eyes widened briefly before she forced a stiff smile. "Evelyn, we didn't know you were coming by," she said, her voice polite but guarded. "I need to have a word with you and Michael," I told her, my tone calmer than the storm brewing inside me. She paused for a moment, then stepped back. "Sure, come on in," she said, gesturing me inside. Walking into the living room, I noticed it had changed again since I'd moved out. The cozy reading lamp I loved was nowhere to be seen, swapped out for a sleek, unfamiliar floor lamp. The family photos I'd carefully placed on the mantel were shuffled around, and several of Thomas's pictures had vanished. Michael came out of the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. "Mom, what's this about?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "I'm here to talk about the house," I said plainly. "Linda mentioned you're planning to put it on the market." The quick look they shared told me everything I needed to know. "We were going to let you know," Michael mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "You know, once we had all the details sorted." "Sorted?" I repeated, my voice sharper. "This place has been my home for 30 years. Your dad and I poured our hearts into building it. It's where we raised you." Claire let out a heavy sigh, like I was being unreasonable. "Evelyn, we get that you're attached to this place, but we have to make choices that work for our family now." "Your family," I said, the words stinging. "And where do I fit in?" A tense silence hung in the air. "Mom," Michael finally said, his tone dripping with condescension, "you signed the house over to us. We're grateful for all you've done, but it's legally ours now. We decide what happens next." I took a deep breath to steady myself. For the last 18 months, I'd been paying the mortgage, $150 every single month, straight from my bank account to keep this roof over your heads. They exchanged another glance, and I knew they weren't surprised. They'd been aware all along. "That was your decision," Claire said, her voice cold as ice. "We never told you to do that." My hand started to shake. "I did it because I wanted to support you," I said. "That's what family does, isn't it?" "We appreciate it," Michael said, but his tone felt hollow, like he was reading from a script. "But that doesn't change the facts. The house belongs to us now. So my 30 years in this home, the money I've paid, my place in this family, that's all meaningless?" I asked, my voice trembling. Michael just shrugged, looking uneasy but stubborn. Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. We can help you find a nice senior living place. I don't want a senior living place, I shot back, my patience snapping. I want my son to show a shred of respect and gratitude. Claire stepped closer, her smile tight as a drum. Evelyn, you're getting worked up. Maybe we should pick this up later. That's when it hit me, really hit me, that there was no fixing this. The boy I'd raised, the son I'd loved with every piece of my heart, was gone. In his place was a man who saw me as a burden, someone to deal with rather than cherish. I've stopped the automatic mortgage payments, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Michael's face shifted in an instant. You did what? He demanded. If you're set on selling my home, you'll have to cover the payments yourselves, I told them. You can't just do that. Claire's voice spiked, her composure cracking. What about our credit? We have plans lined up. Oh, I've heard, I said coolly. Oakwood Hills sounds real nice this time of year. Michael's expression hardened. Mom, Dad meant for this house to be mine. You know that. It was never really yours to begin with. Those words landed like a punch to the gut. Never really yours. 3 decades of my life, reduced to nothing in a single sentence. I understand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Then I guess we've got nothing more to say. My legs felt wobbly as I turned to go. At the door, I stopped and looked back at the son who no longer recognized me. Your father would be heartbroken by this, Michael. And for the first time in my life, I am too. I stepped outside, gently closing the door behind me. The cool spring air brushed against my flushed face as I walked down the driveway, leaving behind the home that had never truly belonged to me. Something inside me shattered that day, but in its place, something fiercer, something unbreakable, was taking shape. You did what? Linda gasped, her coffee mug frozen midair. I stopped the payments, I said again, still stunned by my own nerve. I told them if they want to sell the house, they're on their own. Linda set her mug down with a solid thud. Well, it's about darn time, she said, a grin spreading across her face. Stephen, who'd insisted on coming along after my big showdown, didn't seem quite as fired up. Stopping the payments is a solid move, but we've got to cover you legally. If your name's off the title, you could still be on the hook for those missed payments without any rights to the house. The rush that had powered me through facing Michael and Claire was wearing off, and now worry started sneaking in. Did I just mess everything up? I asked, my voice shaky. No way, Linda said, her tone fierce. You finally put your foot down, and that's huge. Stephen clicked his pen against his notepad, his face serious. We need to play this smart. Tomorrow, I'll reach out to the bank, lay out what's going on, and see what we can do. For now, you should dig up every bank statement or receipt that proves you've been making those mortgage payments. I nodded, grateful for the habit Thomas had drilled into me of keeping detailed financial records. At least I had those to lean on. What about my stuff still at the house? I asked, picturing my clothes and keepsakes still tucked away in closets. Linda straightened up, her eyes glinting. I'll come with you to grab everything. If they try to make trouble, I've still got my swing from our old softball league days. Even with all the chaos, I couldn't help but laugh. Linda had always had my back, ever since high school when she'd stared down the girls who teased me about my hand-me-down dresses. I don't know how I'd get through this without you too, I said, my voice catching in my throat. Stephen reached over and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. You're not facing this alone, Mrs. Harper. We'll make sure they don't walk all over you anymore. The next morning, my phone rang, and I saw it was First Federal Bank. My stomach knotted as I answered, bracing for questions about the mortgage payment I'd skipped. Mrs. Harper, this is Daniel Carter from the mortgage department, the voice said. We got a request to talk about the situation with your property on Maple Avenue. I clutched the phone tighter. That's right, I said, trying to sound steady. Our records show you've been covering the mortgage payments on a house that's no longer in your name, consistent transfers from your account for the past 18 months. Exactly, I said. But I've decided to stop sending those payments. There was a brief pause on the line. Mrs. Harper, I don't usually suggest this, but could you come down to the branch so we can go over this in person? I think there might be some options you haven't thought about. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Daniel, a kind man about Michael's age, as he explained something called an equitable lien. Basically, since you've been paying the mortgage on a property you don't legally own, you might have a claim to it, even without your name on the deed. A spark of hope flickered inside me. What does that mean for me? I asked, leaning forward. It means you could potentially put a lien on the house for all the money you've put in, he said. They wouldn't be able to sell it without dealing with that first. For the first time since finding my suitcases dumped on the sidewalk, I felt like I was getting a bit of my power back. There's one more thing, Daniel said, his voice dropping slightly. Your son called this morning, pretty worked up about the missed payment. It seems he doesn't quite grasp how mortgages work. That didn't shock me one bit. Michael had always leaned on others to handle the nitty-gritty, first me and Thomas, now Claire. And, apparently, my monthly checks. What did you say to him? I asked. I explained that missed payments can tank credit scores and might eventually lead to foreclosure, Daniel said. He wasn't thrilled to hear it. Right on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Mom, we need to sort out this mortgage thing now. I held the screen up for Daniel to see. What's your next step, Mrs. Harper? He asked, his tone calm and respectful. It was such a simple question, but it stopped me in my tracks. When was the last time anyone asked me what I wanted? Not just about the house, but about my whole life. I thought back to Michael and Claire's cold dismissal, how they assumed I'd keep footing the bill for their plans while they pushed me out to the garage. I want what's fair, I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. I want what I've earned. Daniel gave me a nod, his eyes showing respect. Then let's get that done, he said. That afternoon, with Daniel's information and Stephen's legal advice in my pocket, I took another bold step into this new chapter of my life. I applied for a job. I'd spotted a help wanted sign in the window of Rosie's cafe while walking back to Linda's place. You're gonna wait tables? Linda asked, her eyebrows shooting up when I told her. I worked as a waitress all through college, I reminded her with a grin. And I need my own money, my own path. I can't just crash in your guest room forever. Linda thought it over for a moment. You know, Rosie's does serve up the best pie around here, she said with a nod. 2 days later, I worked my first shift at the cafe. By the end of it, my feet were throbbing and my back was complaining, but the cash tips tucked in my pocket were mine alone, earned through my own hard work. That small sense of pride felt like something I hadn't tasted in ages. When I got back to Linda's, bone-tired but strangely energized, I saw 5 missed calls from Michael lighting up my phone. I played the first voicemail. Mom, the bank reached out about the mortgage. They mentioned some kind of lien. What's going on? Call me back right now. I erased it and skipped the rest. For once, Michael could wait until I was ready to deal with him. Linda handed me a glass of wine and settled next to me on the porch swing. So, how's it feel? She asked, her voice gentle. I watched the sunset splash pinks and golds across the sky, letting her question sink in. It's like I'm finally coming alive again, I said. Like I've been in a fog since Thomas passed, and now I'm starting to see clear. And now you're Evelyn Harper again, Linda said, finishing my thought with a smile. I raised my glass in a quiet toast. Here's to Evelyn Harper. Nice to meet her at last. After 2 weeks at Rosie's cafe, I'd slipped into a routine that felt surprisingly right. The tips weren't huge, but they came steady, and the bustle of the job kept my mind busy. More than that, I had a purpose again, a place to show up, folks who counted on me, and a life that was mine to build. So when I spotted Michael hovering near the hostess stand, looking out of place, my heart gave a little lurch. Mom, he said, his voice softer than it had been in years. Can we have a word? Maria, the cafe's owner, caught my eye from behind the counter. Take a quick break if you need it, Evelyn, she called. I gave her a nod and led Michael to a quiet booth in the corner, away from the regulars who'd started to feel like friends. "You seem different," he said, eyeing me closely. I smoothed my apron, standing a little taller. "That's because I am." Michael fidgeted, looking uneasy. "Mom, it's about the house." "I'm not talking about that here," I cut in, my tone firm. "If that's all you came for, you're barking up the wrong tree." "Please," he said, a hint of panic creeping into his voice. "Claire and I are in a bind. The bank mentioned a lien, and our credit's taking a hit because of the missed payments." I took in my son, the pricey watch on his wrist, his perfectly styled hair, the faint whiff of cologne that probably cost more than my day's wages at Rosie's. Everything about him screamed privilege, a life padded by other people's efforts. "What exactly do you want from me, Michael?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He leaned in, his tone urgent. "We need you to clear the lien and start the payments again, just until we can sell the house." The nerve of it nearly made me chuckle. "And what's in it for me?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "We'll make sure you're set up nice," he said, like he was doing me a favor. "There's a great senior community over in Westbrook." "Hold it right there," I said, lifting a hand. "I'm done with being set up. I've been taking care of myself, and you, for years." Michael's face tightened, his attempt at sincerity fading. "Okay, fine. What do you want? A cut of the sale?" I looked at him, this man who wore my son's face but felt like a stranger. "I want my home back," I said simply. He blinked, then let out a nervous laugh. "That's not happening. We've already put an offer on a place in Oakwood Hills." "That's your problem, not mine," I replied, unmoved. Michael's expression turned cold. "It is your problem if you want to keep seeing Sophie, or any of us." The threat landed like a slap, raw and ugly. My own son was dangling my love for his daughter like a bargaining chip. "Are you saying you'd keep my granddaughter from me?" I asked, my voice low. He looked a little guilty but didn't back down. "I'm just saying families should help each other out. Claire and I have plans for our future, and you're throwing a wrench in them. Like I threw a wrench when I paid for your college? Or when I babysat Sophie every weekend so you and Claire could have date nights? Or when I signed over the house and kept paying the mortgage so you could afford that fancy boat you bought last spring?" I said, my words sharp. Michael's cheeks reddened. "That's not how it works," he muttered. "No," I said, my voice steady. "It's not." 7. My break was nearly up. I eased out of the booth, stood tall, and adjusted my apron. "I've got to get back to work," I said. "Mom, come on," Michael pleaded, his voice wavering just a bit. "We really need this. The house in Oakwood Hills is perfect for us. We can't let it slip away." For a fleeting second, I saw the little boy who'd crawl into my lap with a scraped knee, trusting me to fix it all. But that child was long gone, replaced by a man who viewed me as a tool to get what he wanted. "I'll think it over," I said at last. "But first, I need something in writing from you and Claire. Meet me at Stephen Wallace's office tomorrow, 3 p.m. sharp." Relief flooded Michael's face. "Thanks, Mom. You're making the right call," he said, sounding far too confident. As he walked out, I couldn't shake the feeling I might already regret this. The next day, I got to Stephen's office early, my nerves all jangled. I'd barely slept, wrestling with the choice I'd settled on in the wee hours. Michael and Claire showed up right on time, dressed like they were heading to a board meeting. Claire's smile was stiff, but it had a smug edge as they sat down across from Stephen's desk. "Thanks for coming in," Stephen said, his tone professional. "Mrs. Harper has thought about your request concerning the Maple Avenue property." "We're grateful," Claire jumped in, her voice smooth as silk. "I'm sure we can work out something that's fair for everyone." Stephen slid a document across the desk. "Here's what Mrs. Harper is proposing," he said. Michael grabbed the paper, his eyes skimming it. In moments, his face went from hopeful to puzzled, then outright furious. What's this supposed to be? He snapped. That, I said, keeping my voice steady, is my condition for lifting the lien. I'll pick up the mortgage payments again, but only if the house is sold back to me, not to some stranger. Claire yanked the document from Michael's hands. This is absurd, she said. You expect us to sell you the house for just the remaining mortgage? It's worth at least 4 times that amount. It's worth every penny I've poured into it, I shot back. 30 years of payments, repairs, and upgrades. Michael's face was turning a worrisome shade of red. You can't pull this. The house is ours, fair and square. But it's got a lien on it, Stephen pointed out calmly, which makes selling it a whole lot trickier. We'll take this to court, Claire said, her voice icy. We'll hire our own attorney. I nodded, ready for that response. Go ahead, but lawsuits drag on, months, maybe years. Your credit will keep tanking, and that fancy house in Oakwood Hills will be someone else's by then. The reality hit them hard, I could see it in their faces. They'd stretched themselves thin, banking on a fast sale of my home to fund their big move. You set this up from the start, Michael said, his voice low and bitter. Ever since we moved you to the garage. No, I said softly. I just stopped letting you walk all over me. Claire stood up sharply. We need to talk this over alone, she said. As they stepped out, Stephen gave me a nod of approval. You're handling this right, Mrs. Harper, he said. I wasn't so sure. The hurt in Michael's eyes stuck with me. Had I turned into someone as hard and calculating as they were? Before I could spiral too far, the door swung open. Michael and Claire came back, their faces grim but defeated. We'll take your deal, Michael said, his voice tight. But I hope you understand what this does to us, to our family. I held my son's gaze, unflinching. I do. And I hope one day you'll see what it meant when you left my suitcases on the sidewalk. That first night back in my house, I couldn't sleep a wink. I wandered through the rooms, running my fingers along familiar walls, pausing at the doorframe where we'd notched Michael's height every year, lingering in the kitchen where Thomas and I had swayed together on our 25th anniversary. It had been 2 months since that tense meeting in Stephen's office. 2 months of paperwork, strained conversations with Michael and Claire as they grudgingly packed up, and piecing my life back together bit by bit. The house felt like home, yet different. Claire had painted over my warm yellows and blues with cold grays and whites, and the kitchen now had sleek, modern appliances that felt out of place. But beneath the surface, the heart of the house was still there, the creaky third stair, the way sunlight poured through the bay window in the afternoons, the slight slant in the upstairs hallway floor that Thomas could never quite level. I stood in the master bedroom, now bare except for the bed I'd hauled over from Linda's guest room. This space, where Thomas and I had built our life together, where he'd taken his final breath, felt almost holy. I'm back, I whispered, as if he might be listening. The quiet that followed wasn't empty, it was calm, comforting. For the first time in years, I was right where I was meant to be. The next morning, as I was unpacking my small stack of dishes, the doorbell chimed. I opened the door to see Linda standing there, a pot of soup in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. Welcome home, she declared, breezing past me into the kitchen. Well, I guess it's more like a homecoming, right? I chuckled, trailing behind her. Honestly, it feels like a bit of both, I said. Linda plunked her gifts on the counter and spun around to take in the kitchen. Good grief, what did that woman do to your gorgeous oak cabinets? She asked, hands on her hips. She slapped gray paint on them and swapped out the knobs for some fancy brushed nickel ones, I explained. Apparently, oak's out of style now. Linda let out a snort. You know what's really out of style? Kicking your mother-in-law to the curb. We both burst out laughing, though the sting behind the joke still lingered. Have you heard from them at all? Linda asked as she pitched in with the unpacking. I shook my head. Not a word since we signed the papers. Michael made it pretty clear he thinks I picked the house over them. That's not what went down, and you know it, Linda said, her voice firm. You stood up for yourself. That's not the same thing. I wasn't sure Michael would ever get that, but I'd come to terms with my choice. Letting them keep using me while treating me like an inconvenience wasn't something I could stomach anymore. Well, Linda said, popping open the wine, here's to fresh starts. We tapped our glasses together, and I felt a wave of warmth for this friend who'd been my rock when my own family turned their backs. The weeks that followed settled into a comforting routine. I spent mornings bustling around Rosie's cafe, then afternoons bringing the house back to life, making it feel like mine again. I didn't have the cash to undo all of Claire's sleek updates, but I could add my own touches: bright throw pillows, family photos back on the mantle, Thomas's old fishing rods mounted in the den like a tribute. One Saturday morning, I was out front, tucking tulip bulbs into the garden soil, when a familiar car rolled into the driveway. My heart skipped as Michael climbed out, looking unsure of himself. He stood there, fidgeting at the edge of the flower bed. "The flowers are coming along nice," he said, his voice tentative. I gave a small nod, my throat too tight to speak. "Dad always had a thing for tulips," he went on, glancing around the yard. "I can still picture him out here every fall, planting them." I brushed the dirt off my hands and stood. "What's on your mind, Michael?" I asked. He shifted, clearly uneasy. We didn't end up getting that house in Oakwood Hills." I wasn't shocked. The missed mortgage payments had probably trashed their credit. "That's tough," I said, and I meant it, despite all that had happened. Michael stared down at his fancy loafers, now dusted with garden dirt. "We're in an apartment now. It's cramped, but it's making us see things differently, I suppose." I stayed quiet, sensing he had more to say. "Claire's expecting again," he said after a pause. "Baby's due in November." "Congratulations," I said gently, wondering if he'd brought this up to twist the knife, to remind me of the family I'd be shut out from. Michael finally met my gaze. "Sophie keeps asking about you. She doesn't get why we don't see Grandma anymore." The mention of my granddaughter sent a bittersweet ache through me. I missed her something fierce. "She's welcome here any time," I said. "You are too." Michael nodded, then hesitated. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about everything, about how things went down." I held my breath, hardly daring to hope he might finally understand. "I'm not saying we did everything right," he said, picking his words carefully. "But you chose a house over us. I'm not sure I can get past that." My flicker of hope fizzled out. He still didn't get it. "I didn't pick a house, Michael," I said, my voice soft but steady. "I chose not to let myself be wiped out of existence." "That's not the same thing." He frowned, clearly not buying it. "Anyway, I figured you should know about the baby. And maybe Sophie could come by sometimes, if that's okay with you." It wasn't an apology, not even close. But it was a small gesture, a sliver of an opening in the wall between us. "I'd love that," I said. After Michael drove off, I sank onto the porch swing, turning the visit over in my mind. My relationship with my son was fractured, maybe beyond repair. He still couldn't grasp how much he'd hurt me, how deeply he'd broken my trust. But he'd shown up today, reached out in his own flawed way. It wasn't the end, it was a beginning, however small. That evening, Linda and her husband Robert showed up, along with Maria from Rosie's cafe and Stephen with his wife. We gathered in my backyard, the same spot where I'd thrown Michael's high school graduation bash, where Thomas and I had toasted our anniversaries, where life had played out in all its beautiful, chaotic moments. As dusk wrapped around us, the chatter flowing freely among these folks who'd become my true family, a deep calm settled over me, like a warm blanket. "Here's a toast," Linda announced, lifting her glass high. "To Evelyn Harper, who shows us all it's never too late to take your life back." Everyone raised their glasses, their smiles bright and genuine, warming me from the inside out. Later, as stars began twinkling in the clear summer sky, I lingered alone on the porch, soaking in the familiar groans and whispers of my house. I thought of Thomas, of the world we'd created together, of the son we'd raised who'd somehow drifted so far off course. I thought of the woman I'd grown into these past few months, tougher, more resolute, refusing to shrink herself to fit anyone else's plans. This house wasn't just bricks and beams. It was proof of endurance, of grit, of the steady, unshakable strength of a woman who'd finally learned to put herself first. I was home, not just in these walls, but in my own skin, my own story. And for the first time in years, that story lay wide open ahead of me, brimming with possibilities that belonged to me alone.